this is Giant. I got your visual.
Come in, Mike. I'm standing by for you.
Roger. I'll be there in a couple of mics. In the meantime, give him help.
You are listening to episode 20 of the Men Among Men Stories podcast with myself, Hank from Fire Force Ventures, and Bindu from the Men Among Men Stories podcast.
Hey.
We are joined today by none other than Peter McAleese, a legendary professional soldier, author of the book No Mean Soldier, for a very special podcast interview. Hence why we're showing our ugly mugs today.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter is joining us all the way from the United Kingdom via the magic of technology. This is actually the second time we've recorded this podcast just because of technical issues doing this. We're kind of newbies at this, so hopefully this one works out.
We're not IT guys.
Yeah. If you're listening to it, it has worked out, and we hope you enjoy this very special podcast. This is the part 3 of our series on Peter McAleese's book, No Mean Soldier, which we have already covered in this podcast. Part 1 went over Peter's time serving in the British Army during the Aden Emergency, Borneo Confrontation, throughout the Parachute Regiment, and eventually going over to Angola with the FNLA, with serving under a certain Colonel Tony Callan, which was very interesting. And after that, we did part 2, which goes over Peter's time in Rhodesia, South Africa, and Colombia, which was pretty interesting, to say the least. Peter has had a very storied career over many decades, many different battlefields, and it is an absolute honor to have you here, Peter. And on top of that, I got to plug my own thing here. I know this is kind of your podcast, but I'm wearing the Peter McAleese M17 limited edition Pathfinder smock, the Mark I smock, the OG, with actually, if you're watching the video, I'm going to pull out the tag so everybody can see. Approved by Peter himself. It says Papa Mac approves. Hopefully you guys can kind of see it in the video. Individually numbered. We still have about 50 or so left of these at fireforceventures.com at the time of recording this. Peter, your call sign back in the day was Papa Mike. It says Papa Mike approved. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this Slangville and your history with different uniform bits, and then we'll talk a little bit about your life after that.
I thought about designing a jacket, and you and I spoke about it, and you said, let's go ahead with it. And I thought I'd model it off of the Denison smock with features from the South African Slangville, and we built the jacket that you're wearing. And as I say, you sent me one here, and I'm totally pleased with it. And everything that we spoke about is actually on the jacket. So well done.
Right on. One of my favorite features is this crazy pocket here, which has a zipper on it that you can fully open. And that's basically because you wore probably pattern 73 webbing or whatever in South Africa. What and probably some sort of chest rig in Rhodesia or whatever, right? Or some sort of in the British Army, you were wearing just the pattern 58, the canvas webbing. Those shoulder straps you mentioned kind of get in the way of your breast pocket, so that's incredible. This is a really cool feature. I got to show, because this is our first ever video podcast, the first time we're ever doing this. I got to show the inside here. You mentioned you used to sew button compasses to your collar, right? So we were experimenting with different ways of how to figure how to allow people to add a button compass, and we ended up coming up with just a simple pouch on the inside, and a little compartment here actually for the escape and evasion pouch, which is super cool, or escape and evasion kit, which you carried, and obviously you were involved in this very serious helicopter crash that we'll talk about, and I'm sure throughout your career, that thing might have come into handy a few times, more than once. So yeah, this is available now. Fire Force Ventures, approved by Papa Mike himself. And,
approved by Papa Mike.
Approved by Papa Mike himself. This is your thing. We're gonna probably collaborate more in the future with additional products. Anyways, let's enough about the jacket. This is super cool. It's like almost an evolution of the South African slang bell and stuff. We could probably talk kid all day, but let's get into Peter McAleese himself.
Mm-hmm. So Peter, you had quite an incredible life, and it started in very, I guess we'll say, humble beginnings in Glasgow, which, given in your book, almost is given the impression that was kind of your first real battlefield. I mean, it's a real rough town, as you described it. And how did sort of growing up there kind of play into your decision to join the British Army?
It was just when I was young, there was national service going on, or conscription, and I used to see all the guys in the army, and I was fascinated by them, and which led me on to, there was a big, large field just up the road from where I lived, and one day I saw a balloon up there, a Barry's type balloon, and guys were jumping from it in parachutes, and I just got an obsession for it. And that's what prompted me to join the parachute regiment. And there was a movie came out in the 50s. There was different names for it, the Red Berry, paratrooper. And I used to follow all over the place just to watch the parachute scenes. And it's just something that I just lived with it until I was old enough to join the army. And I was encouraged by an old ex-sergeant major. And I joined the army in Market Street in Aberdeen. And that was on the Monday. And on the Friday, I arrived in Aldershot, ready to get beasted through the depot,
Right on. And there was a moment when you were a kid, actually, you kind of followed a paratrooper through the streets of Glasgow, and that's pretty formative for you. Why don't you tell us about that?
It was in an area called Denison, and this guy came off the train, and he had a red beret on, and he was immaculate. His boots were all bulled up, everything, and I was just obsessed. I'd seen a real live one close up, so I started following him through the streets, and I was looking at his bearing and whatnot. And I followed him. It must have been quite a while. And then he turned around and he said, "What the fuck are you doing following me?" So I then took off,
Yeah.
But I was mesmerized by the guy because he really looked the part,
Yeah. That's amazing.
He was a sort of poster type paratrooper,
Right on. So when you do join up, you get sent to Aldershot, you do your basic infantry training base, but of course you were very interested in being a paratrooper, and not only you seem to almost want to become a commando to some extent, because you saw these guys do it. You were fascinated with paratrooping, and it eventually, like, you joined the Special Forces, the British Army's Special Air Service, which was like the Special Forces unit at the time. There's other ones now, of course, Special Boat Service, Special Recce Regiment, but you joined the SAS, and the appeal of kind of being a commando or Special Forces guy appeals to you for a number of years. You actually continue on throughout your career, and we talk about in the last two podcasts, if you guys haven't listened to them, about your time in Aden and Borneo with the SAS and stuff, and later on in Rhodesia with the Rhodesian SAS, and South Africa with the Pathfinder Company 44 Parabats. But how did that, how did it keep snowballing as far as your mindset goes to continue to join these like high octane units? Obviously, as a kid, it's cool to watch movies and see these guys on the streets, and they look magnificent, and you get in there and you're being beasted and stuff, and you do it multiple times, more than once. Most people, are one and done, and they do their 4-year terms, but you want to be, a door knocker, right? How does that mindset keep you going, and what did that look like?
It's just the way I was inclined. I wouldn't say I'm anything special. I'm just like any other guy off the street. I settled into soldiering. I enjoyed the comradeship. I enjoyed the organisation of it. And I just chose my path, and that was the road I went down.
Right on.
Mm-hmm.
But you do leave the British Army after your time in Aden, Borneo. You do a leadership course. At this point, you get married. Like around this time period, you get married after a lot of tours of duty. It's tricky, and you enter civilian life, but civilian life
doesn't last long. So
it was terrible.
yeah.
After that kind of, I guess, high octane operational tempo, right? That's the correct terminology.
Yeah. And we talk about that again, if you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2 of this
maybe
series,
go listen to those right now before. But you decide to sign up as basically a mercenary to go a PMC to go serve in.
I would just say straight up mercenary.
Yeah, to go serve in Angola, which currently is in the midst of sort of a 3-way civil war. Your faction was the FNLA that you were, and you served under a fellow named Colonel Tony Callan, who we talk a lot about in part one.
We almost devote like an hour to.
Yes, yeah, and basically, what the hell was wrong with that guy?
Yeah,
I think he got himself in a leadership position, and he didn't have the proper background for it. But I've got to be fair to this man. He didn't lack guts. He just did not have a great deal of experience in leading men, and it just, he saw it easier to maybe execute a guy than listen to his point of view. But again, as I repeat again, he did not lack guts. He just wasn't a leader.
You mentioned the first time we talked, Peter, there was something about what the first time you saw him, you saw something in his eyes or his.
He was speaking to me. I went to his room, and he started chatting away to me. Now, it takes an awful lot to make me afraid. And I looked and I went, I felt very, very wary of the man. And I didn't find out until later. He said, I want you to take a group down to a place on the coast. So I took 8 men down there. And one of the guys came to me and he says, you done the right thing by coming. And I says, well, why? He says, because Callan was talking about shooting you. He didn't want the competition. Now,
Okay.
I'm only going what the guy said. Mm-hmm. And after some of the things that happened, I think he was telling the truth, yeah. And the guy had been in the parachute battalion at the same time as me as well. The guy that told me that he was going to talking about executing me,
You mentioned, like, this was the last time we talked. This is our second go of recording this podcast, but you did mention it to us last time. Like it was almost like a formative experience as far as your own leadership development went, because a little bit further in the story, you become a sergeant major of the Parabats Pathfinder Company, and you're in a bunch of other leadership roles later on. Not so much in Rhodesia with the SAS and Special Branch, but later on in Colombia with Operation Phoenix. Like you're 100% in a leadership role there with Dave Tompkins, but all the way back in Angola in the 70s. You see this guy lead, and it's through fear and not he doesn't drive people in a way that you like, right? And it's almost like this formative experience. Is like what was going through your mind at the time, watching this guy operate and run this organization? Like, what was sticking out to you?
I only knew him for about a week,
Mhm.
and I just couldn't get over the way he was behaving. Now, when I arrived there, I was told that he was in charge, and I tried to go along with it as best as I could. And as I say, I got posted down to the coast, which suited me fine. I was on my own with a group of men that I liked, but the guy, you never felt comfortable with him. He felt very edgy. I don't know the reason why he was like that. I never knew him beforehand. I'd heard stories about him later on, but maybe it was the only way he saw to do it.
Right on. Well, that was quite the event. You end up later on going to the Rhodesian Special Air Service. You served there for a little while as basically you do selection again. Again, just back to my earlier question about the Special Forces mindset. You do the SAS selection for the second time in your life. I
had to do 5 months.
Yeah. So you keep going, you go through it because this is your thing, right? This is your vocation. You are a professional soldier. Rhodesia is a little different. It's definitely more organized than Angola, but obviously there are issues with that country. You later switch over to special branch of the British South Africa Police. You do a bunch of cross-border stuff. We talk about that in the book.
Yep.
With you guys drinking and there's a certain incident with you guys still being black is beautiful, cam creamed up.
Basically, what happened that we had to do a job in the Mozambique, so we went through Swaziland.
Yep.
Cut the fence into the Mozambique, and we went to bunker bomb a house. And we'd told the South African guys to have water for us as soon as we get back. And it was to wash the camouflage cream off our faces. So we went and done the job. It was fairly successful. And we come back and they says, we never brought you water. You guys like you need beer. And we all drank it. We were really thirsty. And we all drank a couple of beers each and we were all over the place. And so we stopped at a stream and washed ourselves as best as we could.
Yeah.
And we walked back into the hotel and we sort of looked like Rudolph Valentino, the black eyes and whatnot. The guy says, "Where have you been, mate?" We said, "Oh, we've been visiting a coal mine, And he just looked at us and shook his head,
Yeah, probably a minimum wage employee guy, just like whatever.
Yeah.
It's another day in the office. Yeah. But you guys certainly would have looked a little bit out of place. It wasn't all guns and bombs, of course. But like a lot of the podcasts that you've done, and we've watched a bunch of them. A lot of the interviews you've done, you talk about like your first contact, which is a very serious thing. You talk about the obviously Angola, jungle conditions in Borneo, like all this stuff. But it wasn't all guns and bombs. Like back in your SAS days, in the book, you mentioned just a few of the lighter moments. There was a farting contest with these really fancy microphones.
Yeah.
Tell us about that one.
It's the sort of thing soldiers do when they've got nothing to do.
Yeah.
And we were in a language laboratory.
Yeah.
And we started this farting competition. And one of the guys took it fairly seriously and he was eating peas and cabbage. So you'd fart it in the microphone and whatever reading you got. That.
Yeah.
So this guy was up front the whole time. And then one night we got the mic and held it and he shit himself as he was farting.
So the guy won the contest, obviously, right?
Say again.
So the guy won the contest.
Oh yeah, yeah.
These were like I would imagine pretty expensive microphones because this is probably the 50s or early 60s, or early 60s probably this. So these are like fancy army issue, like expensive microphones that
No,
you guys.
we managed to get them cleaned up. You know, they weren't quite the same after it, but they still worked.
And there, just moving forward here, there's obviously Rhodesia was a little more grim, I think, at many times, and you talk about that in the book. But in South Africa, again, you're put in a leadership role, and you do selection again. And you design
for the
third time. You design a special forces selection course. You make it intentionally really difficult, but you decide. Well, first off, why do you decide to do that course again?
Well, the way I looked at it was, I wasn't going to ask the men something I couldn't do myself. So I did it on my own first. And then I did it with the men whilst they were on selection. And so I'd tag at the rear, then pass them by and just check on them as they went along, because it was up in the Drakensberg Mountains. Mm-hmm. I just felt that I wasn't going to ask those guys to do something that I hadn't done. And it paid dividends.
Right on. And like shortly after this, on the note of lighter moments, you get drugged with Valium.
Oh, yeah. What happens, I used to get them up at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
We'd go for a run. We'd come back, have breakfast, and then train all day long, and have a break just before it get dark, and then do some night training. And I was with them the whole time. And then one day I was taking mustard parade, and I could feel my legs buckling underneath me as I came to attention. And I said, I don't feel well. So I went to my room, and the guys were bringing me cups of tea and Coke. Are you okay? And I wrote in my diary, I said, the men are really looking after me. And then I heard, I could hear it just briefly. You've given them too much this time, cut down on it. And they were putting Valium into my fucking tea,
Oh boy.
They got you pretty good.
Yeah.
You actually like almost passed out in front of an officer when they first started drugging you.
Yeah, it was a guy. He was a fantastic officer. He was a South African officer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you couldn't understand, the way the guys behaved.
Yeah.
And he says, have you been drinking? I says, no, I don't drink when I'm working. And he says, well, you're all over the place, And I thought, I'm going to get bumped here, Yeah.
And again, in South Africa, there was also an incident with a mannequin hand and some condensed milk.
Oh yeah, the South Africans are very religious people, and they all say grace before they have a meal and whatnot.
Yep.
It's very prominent, and one of the guys got a hand off a mannequin, and he poured condensed milk, and it looked like it was sperm dropping off the hand, and there's a sign underneath it, and one of the officers came along, he sort of wasn't too happy about it, whereas we could see the funny side of things like that.
Yeah.
But as I say, they're very religious people,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you guys have mannequins around? This is something that I was.
No, what we used to do is, it wasn't my group; it was another group that was working with us.
Right.
They'd put the mannequins in a truck with just a head shown with a hat or something on.
Yep.
And then inside the truck there was twin GPMGs. It was called a Q truck, and they'd ambushed the truck thinking there was guys in the back of it, and then these machine guns would say, come up and then start machine gunning all the side of the road. And so that's what that was the part the mannequins played in it. There was nobody in the back except the mannequins, and there was only a driver and the guy with him, directing it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So Peter, you spent a fair bit of time in South Africa and before that Rhodesia, but finally, after spending many, many, many years in Africa, you do go home. And then
you really go home. You really go home,
yeah.
Right?
You're home for a little while, then you get asked to take part in something that is pretty incredible, which is a mission to, first of all, you're training anti-FARC, F-A-R-C militia, but then you get basically asked to take part in an operation against Pablo Escobar by the Colombian. Is it the Colombian government or was
the mob?
It's basically the mafia.
No, there was always Colombian soldiers with us, and we had a colonel with us who did all the liaison. But there was a uniformed guy with us part of the time, and he smoothed our way wherever we wanted to go. What you got to understand there, Pablo Escobar had an awful lot of people in his payroll, and they held fairly responsible positions within the army and government. I couldn't quote them all, but I just know that when he said jump, people normally jumped. I met the guy once, and I found it an experience. I mean, he just spoke away, but you could see that he was the man in charge. You never doubted it for a minute. Now, I was never introduced to him formally. He just said, come down and have a couple of beers. Well, I didn't drink, so I had coffee. So that was how I met him. And then this other job came up to get him out of the way,
So you after South Africa and stuff, you kind of leave South Africa in kind of a rough state financially, right? Your wife wasn't able to get her nursing license applied to the NHS for a while. On the way out of South Africa, you had a very, very serious parachute jump incident where I think that was your 504th career jump, right? At that point.
Yeah, 504. Yeah.
Yeah. So all the way from the streets of Glasgow, wanting to become a paratrooper, you end up with 504 jumps. Fortunately, that 504th jump is a little nasty. You have a really, really rough landing. And yeah. And at the same time, like there's we talk about this, I think was it part 2? Yeah, yes. It's in part 2 where you get CS gassed in your house. You get tear gas basically a few times during like a house party because of the national emergency law or whatever it was, national security law in South Africa. Some pretty so it's so you go from this and a kind of short gig in Uganda all the way to Pablo Escobar, which is quite the change. And the nice thing about No Mean Soldier, and I'm very grateful you did this, you include everything. You include the appendices, include your like citations about your service in South Africa. It also includes the entire op order for Operation Phoenix. Now, in our part 2 podcast, we didn't go over every little detail because we're here with the man himself.
Yeah.
So that op, why don't you tell us about? And I know you've probably talked about this ad nauseum now because there's actually a documentary, Killing Escobar, that was just released last year where Peter goes over this.
And you've co-authored a book.
And you've co-authored a book too on Amazon.
Yeah.
So that's available now, by the way. Just Killing Escobar. Everybody can look that up. But how, in your, from your perspective, that training tempo and that op, like how does that go down?
With me, I mean, I've been with special forces units most of my life, and we never got an opportunity like that to train. We trained for 11 weeks to do that job. Like you get newspapers, it make you sound like a bunch of thugs that's just been recruited off the street. That was not the case. Every one of those men had served either in South Africa or Rhodesia, and they were usually fighting with larger numbers than themselves. And some of them has actually served under me. So we really hit the training. We went through the whole lot, top to bottom. And what I'd do is change them round all the time. Right, you're in charge. Take over. What happens next? And then we did a couple of full dress rehearsals where we, wore all the kit we'd wear in the day, carried the weapons we'd use in the day, and done that. And then I eased up on them for a bit. But we used to go out every morning and just do a quick run through of everything. And then one day, Dave come along. He says, he'd been on the phone. He says, it's a goer. So everything was ready. Everything was all packed. I just gave him a final briefing. We got in the choppers and we took off. And, you get, again, the military experts say that, that when I say military experts, we're talking about the guys who have opinions about everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They say you couldn't have matched them. Pablo had 80 guards on that date in his compound, but they were broken into groups of 10. We were carrying enough ammunition and to kill about a couple of thousand people. We also had a gunship. We also had the red patches sewn inside our hats that we'd turn round on the target. So as when I was shooting from the helicopter, I could see where my own guys were on the ground. So it wasn't something that was just thrown together. We'd rehearsed it. I mean, these guys that do the talking, how many of them have actually trained for something for 11 weeks?
Mm-hmm. For one op, right? Like that's pretty serious.
Yeah.
So helicopters are going in. Like you were there. There's 2 helicopters. Something happened.
I felt really excited. We got in the choppers, and something, the men were terrific. I just brought them in. I says, "This is what we've been training for. Let's go for it." And there was no, "Oh, what about so and so?" because we'd covered everything. And as we were flying up, I can remember the name of the town. I think it was called Manizales. And when we got there, we swung 90%. We swung due east, and we were going to cross the Andes there. And I was thinking the whole time, did I give these men a fair deal? Is there anyone left out? There was a little bit of mental gymnastics there. But when I went through everything, I came to terms with it. There's not much more we could have done. So as we were flying towards the Andes, there was cloud came down over the mountains. And you can get what's called a sucker hole. I think that's what they called it, where the cloud comes down and the sun's behind the cloud. And you get a re-entrant, and the shadow of the re-entrant comes down on the mountain, but it's only a shadow. You think it's a re-entrant, but the re-entrant is probably a couple of 100 feet further up. And the pilot foolishly drove into it. I noticed that the other pilot, who was very, very experienced, took his chopper right up. They were about a couple of 1,000 feet above us. And I noticed him, and then we started flying through the cloud. And I turned around, I took my seatbelt off, and I turned around and said to the guys in the back, "Get yourself in the crash position." I just felt it beforehand. As I said that, the chopper turned over. We hit the trees. The chopper turned over, and the blade came through the cab, and it missed me because I'd twisted myself around to talk to the guys in the back, and it cut the pilot badly in the arm and the leg. I mean, deep cuts when you think of a chopper blade. And then we came down, and the chopper was spinning in the ground, turning round on itself. At the same time, it was boring a hole in the ground, which was probably about 10 feet deep. And the guys went to try and get out. I said, "Stop, stop, stop." It was the old combat survival coming back. don't get out till the blades stop. Don't get out till the blades stop. So the blades get stopped, and I noticed the pilot, his arm was bad and his leg was partially chopped off. And Dave Tompkins came down. I said, bring down a drip. Give me the, give him the morphine. And I looked at him, and he was just pure blue. And I couldn't get a drip into his arm. His vein had totally collapsed. And I was really trying to work on him. I said, pass the morphine. I just gave it to him. And all I did was make his death less painful. I came out of the hole, and I got up to the top, and then I suddenly realised I was in a state of shock. I just collapsed. Unbeknown to me, I'd broken ribs at the front, broken ribs at the back. And the guys pulled me onto a little ledge. They said, we'll need to try and get you help. I says, I'm not fit. So what they did is they took it was starting to get cold and there was a drizzle. So they took all the bandages and what stuff out the medical pack, and they packed it around me to try and keep me warm. And I said, go and get help. And then I suddenly realised that I'd broke another rule. I let the three of them go to try and get me help. When in actual fact, I should have kept one with me to look after it. Anyway, it was done. And I lay there for 3 days. And the whole time I was thinking, what can I do? And, how can I get out of this, if somebody doesn't come? And, I'm a Catholic, and I started trying to make a deal with God. I says, if you get me out of this one, it'll be a good guy after it, give me a child at 5 and send him to a Catholic school,
Yeah.
Anyway, I lay there for 3 days, and then the third day, I could hear guys come up the hill, and the voices were Spanish. And I said, here we go. And I knew these guys wouldn't be nice to me if they caught me, Pablo's boys, because I found out later that they were out trying to get me. But it was our guys, some of people that our guys had employed to come and get me. And but I didn't know who they were, so I pulled the pin out of a grenade, and I had a little submachine gun interdynamic. And I sat and I says, I'm not going to let these people torture me, So I was going to take them with me. And one of them came straight up to me, and he didn't see me. I was in behind a bush. And I stuck the submachine gun in his stomach, and he went, because I didn't know who they were. And he went, amigo, 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 And he gave me the code name. And I just breathed out. And I said, how long will it be before we can get back? He says, 8 hours. Don't forget, we're 9,000 feet up. Probably 8,000. We're near the top. So they chopped down a tree, and they take the knives, and they're very, very smart with their own knives, and they just cut the tree down. It was like a telegraph pole, and they smoothed it all off and everything. And they tied a rope around me. They dropped me down a re-entrant with a rope around my shoulders, and I was sliding down the pole, and the pain was excruciating. So we went down, and we get down to a stream at the bottom, and we lay to the side of the stream. And I said, God, these guys, they've really saved my life. And I could hear them talking to each other. And they'd been into my pack, and I was carrying escape money. And they were splitting the money up. They'd robbed me. So, and I just said to myself, what is a life worth? So we carried on the next morning. Another time it was 4 hours, but it was 4 hours and 4 hours, And we finally got to this opening, and I could see a little hut there. And they took me, and there was a mattress there. It was made out of Hessian. And they put me on the mattress and gave me a cup of coffee, and I just dozed off. Then they come in and woke me and says, the helicopter's coming. I was in agony by this time. And I thought the helicopter was going to come in and land beside the hut. They says on top of that hill. So I had to climb up this hill. The pain was really, it was really bad. And I was pushing up. They gave me a stick and I was pushing myself up. I got to the top and the helicopter came in and landed and blew me back down the hill again. I was so exhausted.
Yeah.
But I never resisted. I just let myself roll. And eventually got out and they got me to a hospital and the doctor really went to work on me. I mean, and then he says, we're going to get you out of here. The bodies are coming to get you.
Yep.
So they flew me back to Cali. And that was that episode out of the way. You know, the men were there. They were still up for it. And they said, we better get you out of here. And they moved us up to Panama for a bit. It was exciting, you know.
Certainly sounds that way. So
I have a quick thing before we move on to wrap this up here. Again, that was a hell of a hell of a scenario. I do want to go back to South Africa really quick because it's just you have a lot of like almost these. This was like basically a commando mission. This was a raid, right? But there is a moment in South Africa where, just to kind of almost compare and contrast, the war in South Africa. Sorry to step back here, but it's very conventional. You talk a lot in the first bit of your book about your grandfather, Old Miles, who was pretty formative role in your upbringing, right? You admired him a heck of a lot. He was a Western Front veteran. I think, was he an old contemptible? Like he was there at the very beginning of the war?
Yes, he was, yeah.
Right. So he had done his time in the trenches and, on top of all these very commando type missions, parachute insertions, that kind of stuff, 17 operational jumps throughout your career. You also have, in South Africa, this experience of fighting very, very conventionally. And you talk about this at the raid at Kuamato, where it's, you're sending guys into.
Yeah, but both Hank and me said this sounded almost like a World War II or World War I.
If we had taken out the name Kuamato and Parabats and stuff, and we just gave this, describe this to somebody, it would be like Western Front.
Basically what happened is the Pathfinders were taken there and they sent us to work with the para battalion to get experience of how they done things.
Yep.
So there was 4 platoons in the company, and there was 2 Pathfinders with every platoon. And we came into a place called Kuamato, and we were just moving through the bush, and then all hell let loose. And we were up at the front, and this officer said to me, he says, do you think you can break into that camp? I says, get me the Pathfinders, because that's who I was used to working with. So they brought them up, and I gave them a quick battle briefing. And I says, guys, we've been practicing for this scenario for ages.
Yep.
Let's go and earn our pay. And the amount of fire that was coming in was phenomenal. I mean, it was droves of it, but it wasn't hitting. It was inaccurate. But it was like Old Miles explained to me some of the stuff he'd been through in the First World War, and we eventually got the trenches there, and the Pathfinders, they were outstanding. At one stage, I threw a bunker bomb into this bunker and threw a white phosphorus grenade in as well. And this guy emerged out of there. He was about 6'2", and he came towards me. And I went to pull him, and I did a double feed on my weapon. And he was nearly on top of me this time, so I started battering him with the butt. And he was extremely motivated in that he was on fire.
Yeah, white Foss, yeah.
Yeah, and he just kept coming at me, and I was beating him back, and then looking. And one of the guys came to the one side and then shot him. And we then get told to pull back. And then when we pulled back to where we were, these guys went crazy. They were opening up on us with everything, And little did we know, it was not one camp, it was 3 mutually supporting each other. And so we lay there, and the next morning, the gunships came up and they started hammering the place. And then we took it out for a second time. And it was funny, there was a funny incident there. The press came up behind us, the South African press.
Yep.
And they wanted to show a bunker getting taken out. So these two young officers have volunteered. And I remember one of them had sort of red curly hair. And they threw the bunker bomb into a bunker, and it was full of ammunition, and it blew up. And it never harmed them. It was just the two of them were just totally black. And this guy's curly hair was just standing up. It turned black. There's white patches in it with the dust. And but anyway, the photographers and the press made a big deal of it, you know.
Yeah.
It was funny. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a pretty I've seen it. It's like a pretty well-known picture of you after taking I think it was Quemato, where you're standing over a trench with a dispatch SWAPO fighter.
Yeah.
And I think that the combat photographer was like right behind you. Yeah, there was a lot of like footage of that one as far as pictures go. So it was pretty serious. And of course, your career was so varied that you could contrast that with the Escobar raid, Op Phoenix. You can contrast that, of course, with your time in Angola, where it was very Lord of the Flies and just crazy. And you can also contrast that with just patrolling around Borneo and running into not a whole lot other than jungle rot and humidity, right? So it was a hell of a career.
Yeah. So yeah, Peter, you've had incredible life and served in basically special operations in 6 different kind of conflicts.
If we're including Glasgow.
Well, 7 if we're including Glasgow.
That's what I did. My friend who I used to work with used to say to me, that's what he did his first bayonet charge in Glasgow.
I have some family friends from Glasgow, and they would agree with that sentiment, actually. Sure. So yeah, what can after all that, what can the world expect next from Peter McAleese?
Do you know, I do talks and I really enjoy them because I loved soldiering, and I've put a couple of young guys on the road to a military background, you know.
Yep.
And just to see them, because I mean, if I'd have stayed on in Glasgow, I'd have probably finished up, you know, damaging somebody or getting damaged myself, you know.
For sure. Mm-hmm. You're doing a speaking tour right now throughout the UK. Well, mostly England, I would say, right? Just around at different community centers and pubs. So Peter, people can find you on your, I think probably the Facebook page, just Peter McAleese SAS. Instagram, Peter McAleese at Peter McAleese SAS. We'll put these all in the description on our website.
Well, on our website, Peter McAleese's Instagram is actually already on episode 2, but we'll put it for this one as well.
Yeah, and also you have a website, www.petermacaleese.com, where people can just get your book and obviously Killing Escobar's out. Yeah, lots of places for people to get in touch with you, especially if you're listening from the UK. You could actually listen to Peter give talks about his career live. You're probably going to be raffling off a few of these the slang dolls, the custom slang doll or Pathfinder smock as well. So that's where you can find
what
Peter.
We do when we do a talk, we normally put a jacket in, and that covers whatever charity the pub or the club is supporting, you know.
Awesome. So I've seen pictures of that. I wish I could be there, but you know, with the way things are right now and airline tickets and all that, it's but hopefully we can rendezvous soon enough.
One day maybe we can have a Chibuli together.
Yeah, for sure.
I was going to say, whereabouts in Canada are you?
We're in Calgary.
Yeah, we're in the
better side of the Rocky Mountains, I want to say. So
Yeah.
we're about a 45-minute drive from the Rocky Mountains. We could see them
Yeah.
actually from this house where we're at right now. So
Yeah.
our little bunker, we have a mountain view.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
And maybe
Right,
you
well,
can
listen.
already. Sorry, go ahead.
If this doesn't work out, we do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully this if you're watching this, it has worked out.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
hopefully we don't need to
hopefully we don't have
recording part take 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll leave it with that. Just if thank you again, Peter, for coming on. We sincerely appreciate the book is incredible. Everybody should read it. No
Yeah.
Means Soldier. It
Yeah.
is, I mean, I've read all these like famous military history works now. I've Storm of Steel, you made me read that one. My favorite, Will R. Bird, my favorite Great War memoir.
Tons of ones on Rhodesia. We both
tons
read.
of Rhodesia books, but Peter, you are probably like the best military writer I have ever read. In the hundreds of thousands of books I read on all my degree, history degree and stuff, like you were light years ahead.
Yeah.
And it's an honor to be speaking with you, obviously. Thank you for tuning in, and for all of our listeners, you can always find my stuff at fireforceventures.com. The slang bell available now, and I think Peter McAleese, you have some like the death cards that you had back in the day with the 4-4 parabats. You've been killed. Congratulations, you've been killed by 4-4 parabats. So we have the.
That was actually done as a joke. You know, the South Africans took it as something very seriously. You know.
Yeah.
They weren't too happy about it.
So we have those, and they're actually signed by you. So we have a few of those left over. I think we only have one book left, but we'll have a restock of No Means Soldier. Signed copies from yourself. And of course, thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in, especially those that are military and law enforcement, first responders, firefighters. I'm sure you can take a lot of lessons out of what Peter has written and talked about. And of course, again, if you're in the UK, definitely check out Peter for his live shows. So thank you again, Peter. Bindu, is there anything we want to say?
No, that's it. Thank you again very much, Peter, for sitting down and talking with us again. It's always an honor to talk to you, and your book truly is excellent.
Thank you very much, and look after yourself.
We will. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, guys.
Thank you.